let's kind of dive into this. It's gonna be a weird morning for you and me because it's a little disjointed. And I tried to seamlessly put it together. The first gathering, I failed. So, cheers. 2024 has been just a moment of reflection for me. I'm sure that some of you have sat down and thought, 2024. Personally, I'm glad it's done. I had a fun thing happen to me this year. I learned how to play pickleball, um, which I actually enjoy, which is great. I've gotten back into swimming, which has been for me really good. Um, Also, this year, though, my mother passed, so I've got that to remember. So I've reflected on a few things, but one of the things I wanted to at least wade into was the most common question I got all year on the text line. I'm the person, if in case you're wondering who answers the text line, it's me. Um, and this question kept coming up over and over and over again. And and the question I struggled with the answer. I'm literally would say I've been asked it well over 100 times. And the question is similar to this. It's like I want to have conversations with people about things that we disagree, but it ends up into an argument. We live in a country that's very polarized. And not only is it our country, it's the church, it's just all over the place. It's just polarized. And so how do I enter into these conversations without it turning into a just a uh boy, the words are not coming this morning that are good words. A mess, just a mess. And so I want to talk briefly about that, and then we'll dive into the message for this morning, which also is a product of something I've wrestled with all year. So you get the two things that I've wrestled with all year today, and I'll try and do this in a half an hour so you can ask me questions. Okay, pray for me. So you probably are not surprised to hear this. Subscribe to the New York Times online. I also, for those of you who are wondering, I also subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. So I do both, and I read a lot. And at the end of the year, the New York Times asks people for words of advice, which I think is hilarious. But they ask them, and then they publish some of the best ones. And so I was reading it, and I thought, wow, these actually are insightful. Some of these are really good. And then I landed on one, and I thought, I got to share this one. But before we do that, the first one I want to share with you is from Bethlehem, PA. The name is actually on there. Um, People who avoid their own feelings will neglect yours. Will neglect yours. I thought, wow, that's really good. And then I thought about it a little longer, and I thought, yeah, that used to be me. I used to be one of those people who would neglect my own feelings and neglect yours. I I found myself finding this to be absolutely true, and it's part of the dilemma of having conversations with people about hard things. The second one is this. This one's just to the point. Love shows up. Um, Again, wow. This speaks to can that go a little lower? Love shows up. It speaks to not just not just being in the room, but actually showing up in such a way that you bring a presence that says, um, I love you. And then this one, the third one. The third one is I thought was really good. When someone is interpreting your behavior or actions without a spirit of openness, i.e., this is going to turn into a conflict, de escalate the conflict by saying this: I would appreciate it if you could be more generous with me. It really works and it leads to a conversation, not an argument. There is some genuine, real truth to all three of these statements. But this one, I thought, that's what I've been trying to say all year is if you lean into the conversation and say, look, this is going nowhere. Could you please be generous with me? Or would you please be gracious with me? And let's have this conversation without it turning into a mess. I think that helps. Bits of wisdom show up, love shows up. Um, lean into relationships, understanding that feelings matter. And then the last one is just ask for grace. Ask for it. Requires humility, requires some vulnerability. But if the relationship is one you want, lean in and say, hey, be gracious with me, be generous. With that in mind, this morning I wanted to talk about a bigger topic that is often misunderstood and something I've been wrestling with for the better part of this year. Um, as you may have heard or through the grapevine or participated in or been a part of in some way, is that we do groups called Plumline here. One is about the heart and one is about the soul. This last year, I've been a participant in a soul group, and then I led a soul group this last fall, which we will be doing again in the coming weeks. We will be opening up, sign up for that if you're interested. But all that to say this, grace is part of this soul group. To understand soul, to understand who you are, to understand those things, you have to be able to, or should be able to, or we want to be able to, however you want to say this, hear from Jesus as the grace giver. Um, and what I've learned over this year is that I'm not very good at it. I'm not I'm not great at hearing, oh, that's grace versus something else. And so I want to invite you into something that I wrestle with, that I'm now convinced after being in several groups and talking to several people. And then after the gathering, the first gathering, after talking to several people, that this is probably one of the greatest struggles we as Christians face, is to understand, embrace, and live in grace. And so I'm going to distinguish between grace and mercy, and then also kind of invite you into an experience. And I want your questions. It's risky because the first one I stumbled through them, but I think this just prompts a lot of questions. So if you have questions, there's a text line, which again I'll answer, and also, but I think some of the questions help clarify this whole thing. Grace is a big topic, and we won't get to it all, but I'm inviting you to the table of grace this morning. So, with that in mind, um, I want to distinguish between grace and mercy. But first, let's look at a couple verses. Romans 11:6. It says this, and if by grace, then it cannot be based on works. If it were, grace would no longer be grace. This is one of the great struggles of grace. This is one of the great misunderstandings about grace. This is the moment in time when I realize that I've turned my relationship with God into a transaction. I do this, you do this. I pray, you respond. I memorize the verses, you help me to endure. Whatever it might be. I go to church, somehow you bless me. And so we turn the relationship we have with God into some kind of transaction. And for us, especially culturally, transaction is the means by which things get done. And we understand the world much in the context of you do for me, I do for you. And it's reciprocated. It is the way of a capitalistic society. We see life through a transaction. And grace blows up this idea of transaction. But we don't know how to have relationships without transactions. And therein lies one of the great struggles that I have as a human being, but also just as a Jesus follower. There's got to be a deal we can make. There's got to be a deal. And he says, no, not really. And so I often find myself trying to sort out what it means to live by grace, to lean into grace, and to be an expression of grace in a culture that doesn't understand grace. Even in a culture of people who go to church, sing songs about grace, and live as though grace is real, or talk as though it's real, but don't really live as it's real. Because we naturally think, well, if I do for you, you do for me. It is the way of the world, transactional. In Romans 3:22 through 24, the righteousness is given through faith in Christ Jesus to all who believe. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. We've heard this verse a million times. We can gloss over it. We usually get stuck, though, on verse 23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This is why we need Jesus. It's part of the Roman road. If you're a follower of Jesus and been told the gospel a bunch of different ways, this is how we know that we need Jesus. But the last verse is the kicker. The kicker says, meaning all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. It does beg the question then, what exactly is grace? What does that mean? What does it mean that we are justified freely by his grace? Okay, I get the part that I'm a sinner, so there has to be a deal that we have to strike, and there has to be a transaction. And this is where I think the gospel that I learned growing up falls short. That I learned. You might have learned a different one. But the gospel of, well, Jesus did a transaction on the cross. He paid for your sins. He did what you couldn't do. All those things are true, but it's not a transaction. His love for us is not a transaction. What you see is a participant, Jesus, in the failings and sins of his creation. He pays for this, but not in the way that we often think. We often think of it as a transaction, an exchange. Like, oh, I get to go free because Jesus did this, right? No, kind of. How's that work? We're looking for a transaction when in reality, what we're getting is he joins us in our failures by joining in the consequences thereof of our failures. He joins us there. That's far different than a transaction. He's trying to restore relationship. He's not trying to pay for something. He does, but he's trying to restore something. He's trying to bring something back. And in that, he finds a way to incorporate himself into our very existence. The one with no sin became sin so that he might pay our ransom, but also so that he might join us in our failure, in our sin, in our struggle. So, grace is more than a propositional truth. I think I learned it as a propositional truth, unmerited favor, something bestowed to you, a gift from God. All of those things are true, and they are truths. Don't get me wrong, but they are embodied by a person. And when they're embodied by this person, we begin to see the fullness of them. That we begin to see that it's not just about ascending my mind to a belief system that says that you've been given grace, because grace is infiltrating all of our relationships, or it's not, or it is infiltrating all of our understanding of faith, or it's not. I have a misunderstanding of the fullness of what grace is. Grace is a way of interacting with God and with people. It is the essence of what it means to be loved unconditionally. It is also, I would argue, one of the foundational, if not the foundational mark of a culture of Jesus followers is grace. But if we forget what grace is and we wrestle with what it looks like, how do we live into it? How do we do this? And I think one of the first things we have to do is clarify the difference between mercy and grace. I am apparently and unapologetically a lover of movies. They joke about what my favorite movie is, but I'm not going to tell you what that is today because everybody will laugh at me. Mercy is different from grace in this. Mercy is oh, miscongeniality. Um, it is. It makes me laugh every time. It's ridiculously stupid. Um, it is. Mercy is an escape from punishment, and we often see grace as that, just an escape from punishment. Like, I do something wrong, this is the consequence. And mercy says, okay, you don't have to bear that consequence. Whereas grace would say, yeah, you don't have to bear that consequence. And we kind of marry these two concepts and these two ideas, and we reduce grace to this idea of mercy. Now, mercy, important part of grace, all those things are true, but it's so not it. There's this scene in the in a movie called The National Treasure. It is at the end of the movie. It is this. If you, I don't know if you've seen it or not. If you haven't, it's not one of my favorites. But um, guy looking for a treasure, his family history, and anyway, his name's Ben, and he's played by um, Nicholas Cage. He's a treasure hunter. Finds this huge treasure underneath a church in New York, and he has this meeting at the end of the movie with the FBI agent. They're sitting across from each other, and Nicolas Cage is making a deal. He's making a deal with the FBI agent as he hands back, because he had broke some laws in his finding of this treasure. He gives back the Declaration of Independence to the FBI agent and says, "Okay, I want to make a deal for my friends that nothing happens to them." Da 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 da. And it comes down to this statement. It comes down to the statement where the FBI agent goes, "Okay, so what do you want, Ben? What do you want?" And Ben goes, "I just don't want to go to jail." He's trying to make a deal. He's trying to make a transaction. He's trying to figure out how to invoke mercy. He's trying to get mercy. I just don't want to pay the consequences of my actions. The FBI agent says, "I'm sorry, Ben, somebody's got to go to jail." I think that's life. This is a moment in a movie that is extremely like, there's a map on the back at the end of the Declaration of Independence that leads you to a treasure. It's so inconsequential and ridiculous by its premise that you find yourself at the end of the movie going, "Oh, this actually is profound." It's the same statement, there are no free lunches. Somebody had to pay for that lunch. I remember this was a saying my dad said to me my whole upbringing. You know, there are no free lunches. Will you please tell me what that means? As a 6-year old, I'm like, this lunch is free. I have no money. Do you understand that there are no free lunches? What that means? I never understood when I was a kid that somebody had to work to give me that food. Somebody had to plant the food, somebody had to harvest the food, somebody had to get it to a grocery store, somebody had to go over and buy it, somebody had to prepare it, yada, yada, yada. Somebody paid for my lunch. But if you never realize that somebody pays, there is an entitlement that comes upon you. There's a lack of awareness of what is going around you in such a way that you don't even see grace when it arrives because you're entitled to it. You don't see mercy because you've been constantly given mercy, because you've never experienced the consequences, the full weight, the consequences of your actions. Oh, I live in that world. I live in the world where I can figure out how to evade. I don't want to go to jail, but somebody has to pay. Well, who's going to pay? I'm not going to pay. Somebody's got to pay. This is where we as followers of Jesus often miss this. We often miss somebody has to pay. Grace says, "Yep, somebody's paying." And in many ways it's all of us. But mostly what we see is grace is embodied by this person of Jesus who joins us here. His paying wasn't just that he went to a cross and the sins of the world were attached to him. He paid when he stepped down out of glory and took on flesh and dwelt among us. It cost him something to join us here. Join us. Join us in this, what we call what? Life. Let's go with life. Let's go with mess. Let's go with our failure. He joined us here. He was he was not part of the mess. And so part of the cost, it's part of the free lunch, part of the idea that it costs something. Jesus steps down out of glory, dwells among us, lives a perfect life, and then joins us fully in our humanity on a cross while he inherits all of it. That's grace. Mercy is transactional. It merely stops the consequences of the failure, the sin. And we walk away without consequences, but somebody pays, right? There's a victim, there's somebody that gets hurt in it, somebody along the line. In my failures, when I've taken a step back and honestly looked at them, I've said, oh, that person got hurt and that person got hurt. Those are the ones that haunt me the most in my history, in my when I have regrets, when I look at my life, I'm like, yeah, that one affected a lot of people. And when you're in a role like this, it often my failures can be magnified. And you find yourself going, oh man, I wish I had that back. I wish I had that back. Wish I had that back. And yet, in the middle of all that is the 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 idea of failure and the consequences that it has in other people's lives is our lives. If you're sitting there going, "Yep, never felt that, Kev." Okay, then you need to do some work because what you've done to other people has felt even more egregious because you have not owned it. Well, what about mercy and grace? I'm invoking grace. You don't get to invoke grace. You get to live grace. You don't get to extract grace from other people or from God. Christmas is a wonderful time of year. No laughs. It is the time of year when you get a list of gift requests from your kids. And the expectation is that that will be met, whether by Santa, grandma and grandpa, mom, dad, whoever. But it is invoking the idea of gift giving. I expect gifts. You know, there is a entitlement attached to that. And when we attach it to God, when we attach it to other people, when we attach that idea that I'm entitled to grace, it's no longer grace. It's something else. Grace is diminished by demanding it. Let me share with you another verse because grace is tricky and we twist it to our benefit. It's Romans 6. This is one of the misunderstandings of grace that Paul is trying to fix. And he says, "What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? Or don't you know that all of us who were baptized into Jesus were baptized into his death? We were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life, there is this idea that we can lean into grace in such a way that we can extract it, in such a way that even if we sin all the more, wouldn't grace abound all the more? Shouldn't you just forgive me more if I sin more? Shouldn't you just be kinder to me if I fail more? Shouldn't you just and in ourselves, when we say it out loud like that, that sounds awful. But when we impose upon the grace of God, what we're doing is we're crucifying Jesus all over again. And the thing is that I do this. Grace goes beyond mercy, it goes beyond compassion, it goes beyond forgiveness, it goes beyond and beyond and beyond. And, and because grace is a intellectual concept that we wrestle with, oftentimes we try to reduce it to something that we can manage and understand, and also we can use it as a transaction. We actually take grace as a transaction. And what I'm trying to tell you today is the free gift of God is grace. And that gift is far more encompassing than you ever imagined. It's not a gift that eliminates the consequences of your sin. It's not a gift that eliminates somehow, some way, all the ripple effect of the failures that we've had in life, all the mistakes that we've made, all those things. That's not grace. Grace joins us in it and loves us through it and elevates us to our correct position. Mercy may reduce and take away consequence. Grace says, you're mine. You're with me. I'm with you. I just made a great mistake. That's okay. Let's deal with the consequences. Let's deal with the ripple effect. Let's own it together, and I'll walk through it with you together. Now, you can say, wow, that's what I understand grace to be. Most of the time, when we do it with other people, we expect reciprocation. It's not a free gift. We put strings attached. And when there are strings attached, it's no longer grace. It's a transaction. With God, there's no strings attached. See, when I know that He joins me in it, when I know that my failures, He joins me in my failures, and He walks with me, He calls me His son, He walks with me, and He calls me His friend, and He walks with me, and I'm His son, He's my father, whatever it is. And we're in this relationship and we walk together, and He says, yeah, that failure is going to cost you and me. Let's walk through it together. That's grace. Mercy would be, I'm going to take away the consequences, but we're not going to walk through it together. What I'm going to do is I this needs to be clear before I go to the next step. And there's a next step in this. So I wanted to take questions right here. I want to make sure grace is clear and that you have some feeling of clarification, because then we'll do an application. This is your moment to ask me questions about grace. I know it's not all encompassing, but I'm hoping if I can clarify anything, I would like to. And the room went crazy silent.
Kenji just got roped into this, so he's really
Yeah, I see that.
Looks great today too.
Kenji's got it. Where are we?
So,
Okay.
what then is the essence of grace if it's not taking away the consequences of it? Is it just to get company through your, like, just.
What's the essence of grace?
Mhm.
It is to elevate despite failure. despite sin. And it is to not just to judge said failure or to that's often the way we hear God is the judge, is the I'm here to tell you what you did wrong. I'm here to tell you why you did it wrong. I'm here to convict and condemn. Grace says, okay, there's consequences for this. I'm not going to alleviate the consequence, but I'm going to be with you in it, and not condemn you, but elevate you to your rightful position as my child. And we'll do it together. And then, therefore, the consequences are borne, bear, or with both of you, rather than you alone. Grace enters in, doesn't stand back and play the judge. That's the difference.
I just wanted to ask you or to clarify. I think a lot
Hmm.
of times when we think about grace, we think about sin.
Hmm.
But I know if I'm weak, I need wisdom.
Hmm.
I'm frustrated. That's not sin,
Nope.
but I also can depend on grace
Hmm.
for God to meet me in that as well.
For sure. Yeah. I. That's why I just didn't use the word sin. I use the word failure. And you're right, weakness. And he meets us in those places. And he actually speaks to us in those places when we're most vulnerable, when we're most condemned, when we're most, and a lot of it times is just self condemnation. We shame ourselves, we condemn ourselves, and we also hide from the consequences of said failures or weaknesses. And he says, "Let me join you there. Let me strengthen you. Let me tell you who you really are. Let me walk with you. You're not alone in this." I think grace moves in that direction.
Can you speak a little bit more to the point of like, let me tell you who you really are?
Mhm. Yeah, this is the common question I think for most of us is who am I to God? Is he tells us we're his children, he tells us we're divine masterpieces, he tells us that we're worthy of the cross. We're worthy of being saved. We are worthy of an immense sacrifice. He counts us as his dearest creation. And so at the soul of every person is the understand it needs to be the understanding of that that I'm the most valuable part of creation that God made. We are the most valuable part. And if we believe that, grace is easier. If we don't believe that, then grace is really hard because we often forget that. We often forget that we're related to God, that we're created in his image, that we are extremely valuable to him. And I don't know why we're so easy at forgetting that, but we do. Uh, I'm in on that. And I don't see everybody that way either. That's where my grace missed the mark with other people. I don't always see them as being valuable. Yeah.
In the middle. Right
You're slacking off, Tim.
here. Ken just killing it. He's killing it.
So, worth is something that I personally. You said worth and worthy, and so now
Yes, yes, yes,
my
yes.
mind went to a whole different direction. So, would you say um, that mercy is almost a hierarchical, like you are not worthy of this, but I'm still going to grant you this mercy,
Hmm.
whereas grace is one step further, which is no, you are worthy, and instead of having that hierarchical sort of step, it's more I'm coming now. We're on an even playing field because I'm meeting you where you're at, and not only am I going to meet you in there, but you are worthy of that love. And
Hmm.
so, is it? Would you kind of, you know, ascribe that word to it? Whereas mercy is, you're not really worth it, but I'm still going to give it to you. Whereas grace is, I see you and I love you, and you are worthy.
Yeah, usually mercy is meted out by the person who has the capacity to judge you. Mercy is okay. We're going to let you off this time. Mercy is I'm not going to give you what you deserve because I'm so magnanimous. I'm just that kind of guy. I'm gonna. So the focal point becomes the person who's extending the mercy, rather than the person who's receiving it. And so this person then gleans something and takes something from the person who they're extending mercy to. Part of their humanity goes away because they become less than. The most humane thing to do is to give people the dignity of following through with the consequences of their own failure, but being with them in it.
Kevin, to your left.
Tim,
So it strikes me that kind of two things, and I want your reaction to this. But one,
yeah, this is reaction, not answer.
yeah. No, one is that if this is true,
Mhm.
then that is my security because there is no way to lose something that I never earned in the first place.
Correct.
The second one is that I must know that, yada that, in order to extend it myself.
Yes. You have to appropriate it to yourself, to your soul.
So how do you do that?
You yeah.
How do you do that? Like, because one thing that strikes me is that we don't do a lot of this is how you do this.
Mhm.
We do a lot of learning about this. We do a lot of
Mhm.
don't you understand it's true?
Yeah.
But we don't do a lot of what does it take to really believe that this is true?
Yeah.
And one of the things I find very helpful,
Mhm.
or I should say, it seems to me that much of that is because we're trying not to be dogmatic. We're trying not to be legalistic. We're trying not to be a lot of these, you must do it this way, otherwise you're not doing it.
Yeah, right.
Except when I don't have tools or words or ideas,
Yeah.
I need someone else's to borrow.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So what do you do?
Well, you just set me up. I appreciate that. So, um, give me 1 second and I'll wrap this thing up with that. Let, I'll do it now. All right.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you actually
Sorry,
got a
yeah,
question,
yeah,
Tim?
Yeah. I paid him
Matt,
$20.
I thought
20
you
bucks, 20
dozed
bucks.
off over there in the corner. All right, one more.
I don't know if this will be helpful, but
I'm sure it will.
to the to the last question, of how do you appropriate it, or how does it get to
Mhm.
does it get it below your skin?
Yeah.
What I am learning is that, you know, obviously Scripture says that we're transformed by the renewing of our mind, and so it's actually the journey is not from head to heart; it's from heart to head, and I have to constantly remind myself of who I am. And I get those answers through rereading over and over and over and over again what the Father thinks of me.
Mhm.
And I get there by what the song said this morning. I run to Him again and again and again and again because I have to, somebody's got to tell me again. It wasn't good. Like last time was good. It was good for that moment. I got to know again.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna mess it up again, and I've got to have something to run to. So I don't know if that helps, but
Sure.
that was
It's good.
that's just what I'm learning. I'm just sharing things that have been shared with me, and my mind. It's my mind that's sometimes my biggest enemy.
Sure.
That I'm wrestling with. So
Yeah. Thank you. All right. If I could get you to um, just posture yourself in your seat, I'm going to walk you through something. Hopefully, that will help answer that question. And if it doesn't, you can text me. Um, so, how do you know? Thank you, Kenji, by the way. How do you know the voice of grace? And how do you know what grace looks like when you see it? One of the things that has changed about me over the last 5 years, I said to you in the beginning that I was one of those people that suppress my feelings, and um, I've learned to engage them. And and when I see grace around me, it invokes emotion for me. When I see somebody doing and acting in a gracious way, it brings emotion. And so, what I would ask you to do is just put your feet on the floor. Um, if you're comfortable in closing your eyes, close your eyes. If not, that's fine. Just find a focal point. Allow these words that I'm about to say to pour over you in a new way. I'm going to share with you a familiar story, a story that I think exudes and explains and shows what grace looks like and what it sounds like. Take a deep breath. Listen for the voice of grace. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between his two sons. And not long after that, the younger son got all together all he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "I'll make a deal with my dad. I will make a transaction. How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and I'm here starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'" He forgot who he was. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son and he threw his arms around him and kissed him. So grace looks like that. The son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Let's make a deal." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast. Let's celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found." So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has come back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, we've had this deal all these years. I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fat calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because your brother, this brother of yours, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he is found." Grace does more than overlook sins and shortcomings and weaknesses and failures. Grace is actually looking for us, but it will never impose itself upon us. The father doesn't chase the young son down when he leaves. He doesn't go and seek him in his place of awayness. He lets him make his choices. But when he comes, he doesn't let him be reduced to a slave. "You're still my son." Grace celebrates that. But notice what he doesn't do. The father doesn't just give him half back. They both have to live with the consequences of his decision. They both have to live with the fallout of relationship. They both have to, but he walks with him in it. He elevates him back to sonship. He calls him who he truly is. And he rejoices with a party. He also doesn't impose his will upon his other son. He doesn't grab his other son and say, "You're going to the party." He implores him, he asks him, but he allows the sons to experience the consequences of their own actions, but still calls them sons. The older son gets to keep the estate, but he's never had the deep, abiding relationship with his father that went beyond transactional. He never enjoyed the fullness of the relationship with the father because he didn't understand grace. And he wasn't about to embrace it because his brother came back. So, how do we hear it? How do we know it when we see it? Grace doesn't look the other way, it's not permissive, it doesn't pretend like bad things don't happen, it isn't trite. It actually is joining in with the suffering of others, even in their failures. That's what the Father does here. Both his sons. That's what he does. That's what he does with us. And he looks beyond what the world would call us failures. The world would call us incomplete, small, insignificant. You might even have an inner voice that calls you those things. You might even shame yourself. You might even be a person that struggles with the idea, am I worthy? Am I worthy? And the answer to that question is yes, because you are a human. You're worthy of the grace of God. So thankful that we get a picture, the words of grace. What are the words of grace? They speak to our very soul. Grace sounds like, you are my son. You are my child. It sounds like you are forgiven. It sounds like I'm always with you. It sounds like I will walk through with you. I will be present with you. It's it's the opposite of you are not worth it. It is the opposite of you are not worthy. It is the opposite of it it doesn't matter what happens to anyone else. It does matter what happens to anyone else, and I will help you walk through it with them and with you. There is not a minimizing of the ripple effect of our hurtful ways. Grace doesn't dismiss pain, nor does it cause you to live in it alone. I'm going to ask the band to come up. We're going to sing a few songs, but we're going to take communion together. This is the closest thing we have to understanding the depth of grace. We celebrate communion every week. And I love the fact that the story of the prodigal son, the prodigal father, the whatever you want to call that story, ends with a party. Do you know why it ends with a party? Because of grace. He celebrates the one who squandered everything, everything. Celebrates the one who was not worthy by a worldly standard. He celebrates the one that anybody reading the story would go, yeah, that one doesn't deserve it. And he says, let's have a party. Kill the fattened calf, crank up the music, we're going to dance. Because the one who thought he was no longer my son has been restored to a place of sonship, not because of anything he's done, but because of the gift that I'm giving him to be my son. Everything the sons had were a gift from the Father. Everything. Neither of them could see it. Neither of them could see the grace that was bestowed upon them. One thought he earned it, and the other one thought he squandered it. You're both wrong. And the one that thought he earned it couldn't join the party because he convicted the other one of not earning it. A community of Jesus followers celebrate both. They celebrate the one that thinks he has to earn it and says, hey, you don't earn this. This is a gift. And the one who squandered it, we're in it with you. Can't fix all of that, but we're in it with you. And we'll walk with you. So let's party. Let's have a party around the table. It's the last Sunday of the year. Communion is served, and the music will be playing. Dancing is allowed. Flags are not.